massive and girthy, how girthy long. Oh. It's here, it's finally here. This is the Batman from McFarlane that I was actually anticipating probably the most, even prior to when we had a clear release window on the Dark Knight trilogy. This was the one that was just the more vibrant, yet the one that was speaking to my most favorite clash amongst pretty much everything when it comes to apparel, shoes, clothes, anything that has something that I can customize as far as color palette. Black with red accents is my jam. Yes, I almost came this close to paying way above what should be MSRP for some Beats because they always went with that classic black with red accents. I know I almost got suckered into that. And now we have that style of color scheming going with one of my favorite interpretations in media for Batman, and that is the Batman from Arkham Knight. Yeah, they strangely went with the Arkham Knight version of this suit because this is technically supposed to be Earth-2 Batman, which is basically a comic run version of the character. It's still Bruce Wayne, but the only real two differences, and this is kind of spoilery for the comics, but the two key differences with Earth-2 Batman is that one, he reveals his identity to Selina Kyle and marries her, thus giving birth to Huntress, aka Helena Wayne. And then the second, which in my opinion is probably the most significant, he uses guns. He's not afraid to kill. He's not afraid to go that extra mile. So we got this interpretation here, except McFarlane, interestingly enough, went with the Arkham Knight suit, which is funny because at first I was going to chastise them just a teensy-winsy bit for not actually lifting the exact body mold of the Arkham Knight suit that they've done in the past, specifically couple of years ago. I think it was late 2020, early 2021 when we got the Arkham Knight McFarlane, which in my opinion is one of the finer McFarlane Toys Batman figures that we've gotten in recent memory. So a little bit of a shame, but you can't really knock them for accuracy because technically speaking, what you're seeing here as far as the actual design of the suit with the color aesthetic is really what he looked like in that DLC suit that you get to download as an extra skin for the Arkham Knight model in game. So they really didn't deviate from that whatsoever. You see an awful lot of the inspiration with the V here in the middle, the red symbol on top, and then the utility belt is pretty much directly lifted from that, so you can't complain about that. I would even argue that in person, he looks a little better than he did in some of the promo shots. I was a little nervous that they were going to make him a little too glossy because some of those promo shots, as ecstatic as I was as far as the color palette and the aesthetic, and the actual look of the character, I wasn't over the moon about how glossy he looked. He looked like he was just dipped in some kind of oil. Here, however, you can see that it actually worked to their benefit because they ended up matting out a little bit of the color scheming, especially on the darker spots of the suit with this matted, almost honeycomb kind of pattern going alongside the thighs, the arms. You see an awful lot of the Kevlar feel, and you know McFarlane has always excelled with that, so it's cool that they applied that to the texturing as well as the wrinkles on the suit that, again, makes it a bit more accurate to the way that he looked in game. And what I appreciate even further is that the glossy parts that needed to be glossy are still kept intact, such as the red V right here, the bat symbol right here, which is very reminiscent of the Flashpoint Batman version, but a little smaller, and of course, like I said, red, those parts are glossy, and it's a little difficult to make out on camera, but you'll notice that even the center portion here inside of the V is a little bit of a darker tone. It's not full on black, but it's darker than even some of the grayer parts on the biceps, obliques, and of course, like I mentioned, thighs and crotch piece. Once we get to the boots and gauntlets is where we get into a much darker aesthetic, but much rubberized textured look to give it a kind of a firmer look to the way that that material looks. So I know it's a little redundant of what I'm saying, but everything just works together to give me an impression that this is actually one of the finer looking Batman. If it wasn't for a major discrepancy in sizing and scale of the thighs and the calves, is it just me or is it looking just a little pudgy? I don't know what it is, but everything looks to scale. Except once we get down here, I feel like the knees are just a little lower than they need to be traditionally. And the perfect example to illustrate this would be to compare this to one of my favorite McFarlanes practically ever, the Arkham Knight Batman right here. And as you can see, definitely not the same body mold, not the same sculpt whatsoever, completely revamped. Even the head is a little different. But what I was trying to articulate here is that you can see how on scale and pretty much to like accurate the shins and the guards in front are really to the rest of the body. You can see that the thigh and the leg are pretty much equal measure from top to bottom. Whereas here, I feel like everything is a little stip-ended right here amongst the shin. Again, I appreciate the texture look and the paint apps, but there's just something about everything that it's scaled right here versus the way that the thighs and the rest of the body is that just looks like he's coming off a little short. It's funny because it's technically the same height as the Arkham Knight Batman, but there's just something kind of off looking about those legs. Now, while we're comparing, I actually do need to bring some more attention to that head sculpt, because at first, I was going to chastise them for not using the same mold as they did with Arkham Knight, because frankly, I didn't think that there was too much wrong with that original version. It's actually one of my favorite Batman sculpts, so I thought to myself, why couldn't they just reuse that? Once I then looked at the source material for that DLC that you get in-game, this is actually technically much more accurate. But it brought up an interesting point, an interesting topic of debate, or rather speculation, that someone else brought up online on the subreddit. Could it be that maybe this could be used as the template for a potential Arkham Origins McFarlane? Who knows? The head on the Earth-2 Batman is a little stockier, he's got shorter ears, but they're not short enough to look one-to-one with the DLC sculpting, because in the game, you'll notice that his ears are a little bit shorter. Here, they actually purposely made them long. Yeah, he's got the red eyes, he's got the rest of the shape around the mouthpiece of the cowl, but everything else is slightly similar, yet kind of also different, that it looks more accurate to that of the Arkham's Origins Batman as opposed to the Arkham Knight DLC suit. So, that would be actually pretty interesting to see if maybe that's something that they could lift and use as resource material for an Arkham Origins Batman, because that's all we really need to complete the collection is an Arkham Origins. We got Knight, as obviously we've pointed out, we got the original Asylum, and then just recently we got the repaint for City. So the only thing left is that Arkham Origins, the underdog, if you will, from Warner Bros. Montreal. Come on, McFarlane, make it happen. And while we're on the subject of faithfulness to that DLC skin, it would have to be the utility belt, because at first, much like I was going to do with the head, I was ready to grill them about their reuse of the utility belt from the Flashpoint Batman. But two things. One, again, it's accurate. Looking back at the source material of that skin in Arkham Knight, that is exactly the same utility belt that he's using. But I also appreciate the backstory behind the utility belt, because this is the same one as Flashpoint Batman, the same Thomas Wayne Batman that resorted to using guns. Being that this is Earth-2 Batman who uses guns, like father, like son. So that's a really cool tie-in that I appreciated, not just for McFarlane to replicate, but also for the folks over at Rocksteady that were making the game at the time and are likely not there right now, hence Suicide Squad. Oh my god. What I will grill them on, though, is going to be this massive cape, as you can see. Holy shit. I mean, look at this cape. It is massive. Very reminiscent of some of the earlier McFarlanes. But ironically, what I find kind of interesting about this cape is that even though it's massive and makes him top heavy, two things are happening. One, it is very rigid and durable, that even pulling him out of the box, I feel like the plastic was going to give out first before the cape. I'm always scared of scuffing the cape or damaging it, or hell, even tearing it around the sides here in the middle part, because of the way that you have to pull it out of that little plastic slit when taking him out of box. This is one of the few instances where I saw the plastic warp and tear more so than the cape, because of how durable it actually ended up being. Plus, again, it goes with that awesome clash of having it be black and leathery on the outside versus the glossy red on the inside. It just works. But the second thing is that even though it is still top heavy, nothing takes away from that, it is so massive and girthy and stable that it actually keeps the figure up. Right now, I can easily tell that the figure's not standing on his own 2 feet. He's actually being stood up by the cape, so no need for a base or even a flight one at that. You could pretty much just utilize the cape. That's just how girthy, long, and very distributed in weight and horizontal plane it is to be able to hold the figure up in place and even still give him a slightly dynamic pose. But of course, if you want to go with any other poses to at least make him look even more badass, that's where the articulation comes into play. The head is a little on the tricky side. In fact, so tricky that I'm a little worried that I might have gotten a weird model, but hopefully it's just an isolated incident. The head is a little on the stiff side when turning left to right, to where it's making a very audible noise. And the reason for why that is happening is because I actually had to pop it back into its proper socket, because when taking him out of the plastic, the head just popped right off. And I think it might have been accidentally, At least I'm hoping it's accidentally, considering that things have happened recently with the Dark Knight Trilogy wave. As I've ranted before, I'm nervous that maybe things are getting a little rushed over there in McFarlane, but I'm praying that I'm wrong. Sure, it stays in place and it's very firm, but rotating the head is very, very stiff to where I'm almost kind of scared to turn it all the way around, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep it in place. But it is able to turn 360. Just hope that yours is not as stifled as mine. And tilting downwards is pretty generous, as you can see right there. And tilting all the way up in place is also pretty good, though it stops at right about that angle. And then tilting from side to side is also pretty cool. So as long as you get an accurate joint, you're going to be in good hands. Once we get to the top arm joints, you are able to move them all the way towards that direction and stopping at about right there before the very strong cape kind of encroaches over the shoulders and stops it in its tracks right about right there, unless you then deviate into the extension where we do have these pretty flexible shoulder joints along with that middle washer piece that is capable of not only properly extending towards the side as you see before you right there, but also there is a little bit of shrugging motion going with those pegs on the inwards part. Then we get to biceps where it's an interesting situation because on the one hand, this is meant to be the Arkham Knight Bruce Wayne / Batman. This is meant to be one of the beefier cakes that we've ever seen Batman ever be in almost any kind of medium, and I respect the accuracy in muscle sculpting. Unfortunately, that muscle sculpting is also just kind of tightening up on the joints, and I've already given this guy a pass with the hairdryer like I mentioned before. Even then, it's a little tough to get these biceps to rotate in almost any kind of direction. That the mobility is there, but if you're looking to do it for like the even 360 degrees for good measure, it really doesn't feel like it's going to happen, at least not without any warping of the plastic. So I'm scared to do that. We're going to go ahead and just leave it in place, but the biceps are able to give way a tiny little bit right there. Both elbows, however, are able to bend all the way up, though they do get a little limited once you get to that angle, but again, it's only because of just how massive that bicep really is. And then the joints on the wrists are interesting because they went with the cylindrical piece, but they baked in the hinge inside of the hand. So you'll actually notice that when you not just rotate, but also move the hand inwards and outwards, the hinge is very apparent right there in the middle of the wrist. So it is going to be very visible, much more visible than your traditional wrist joints, but it does allow an awful lot of mobility when that happens. We then get awesome torso articulation at the slight expense of having this, I'm just going to say it, this slightly ugly cut right here in the middle that I'm not a huge fan of when almost any McFarlane figure does that, whether it be for Batman or any character. It just looks very obvious. I feel like this could be flushed just a little bit better. As it stands, it just looks like he's wearing it looks a little bit like he's wearing a crop top, which is a shame because I love the look of this suit. It just makes him look like a crop top that just happens to have the rest of the suit right underneath. The way that certain, not even just Batman figures, but McFarlane figures are sculpted in this manner. The trade-off, though, the benefit, is that you do get some awesome torso articulation because you are able to rotate side to side. Only much like the biceps, this thing is just so girthy that a little bit of restriction is not only seen but heard there. Though a little bit is able to give way a little more due to the way that the waist does allow some slight etching from side to side, just no actual 360 movement, but torso movement is allowed horizontally, as you can see right there, and extension is actually pretty beneficial on not just the middle cut, but also the waist down here at the bottom towards the utility belt, as well as crunching on the obliques from side to side. Not much really in the way of the inwards portion where you're able to crunch inwards like a sit-up, but there's a little bit going on right there, just not as much as I would have loved to have. Legs can move only about that far. That diaper is actually constricting quite a bit of mobility towards the front. It's not exactly like keeping it in its place too firmly down, but it's just getting to that final destination that it becomes very resistant to. But then moving towards the back, you can see right there that there's a little bit more going on right there. And then extension towards the sides is actually pretty fluid, as you can see right there. And it also allows you to see a little bit more of the detail with the crease of the suit underneath right there. That's very lifelike, so I do appreciate that. Though as low as they may come off, and my little gripe with how much shorter it makes the shins and the calves be on the legs and disproportionate, the knee joints are able to fully bend all the way up, so no discrepancies there at least. And my favorite style of the ankle joints are back again, and they are actually pretty cool. They're able to fully rotate at both ends, at the top and towards the bottom, as well as being able to bend the ankle inwards and outwards. And again, it's made out of that cylindrical shape that flushes a little bit better with the boot design, so it just kind of hides in place. It even has a little bit of creasing going on right there to blend in with the texturized look of the rubber of the boot, so that's pretty dope. What is not dope though is just how shallow the toesies are, to the point where sometimes it even feels like I'm not really bending them, but they are there, just a little on the very, very short side. So as you'll have noticed, there are a couple of quirks here and there that I wish that they could have rectified by simply just bringing in this model and just painting him black and red. I mean, imagine a Futura version, like the Futura skin, with this guy just black and red. That would have been sick. It would have given people a chance to own this guy again without paying scalper prices. It would have been a win-win, but still, we still got a mostly positive rendition here in Earth-2 Batman, and they decided to take one of the finer, more staple things of pretty much any Batman figure, let alone the Arkham Knight version, to go along with him. And that's going to be his signature Batarang, and as you can see, they pretty much lifted the exact same one from the Arkham Knight version. I would even argue that it feels a little girthier on the blade portions of the top part of the wings, but aside from that, it's pretty much the exact same thing. The only thing missing is a little paint decal in the middle insignia there. That is not silver. It's pretty much just a hollowed out piece. But overall, it's the exact same thing. It's even durable like the original, but still kind of malleable so that you don't easily break it when slightly bending it from side to side. And it fits pretty good in hand on either one. But here comes my little, wishful thinking, is that I would have loved for some additional accessories, whether it be an extra pair of hands, like fisted hands, to swap out. Granted, the way that they sculpted that wrist articulation might have made that a little impossible, but at the same time, I could have sworn there's been other McFarlanes, Batman or not, that have had that hinge joint baked in and still managed to have interswappable hands, where you're simply just able to take it out of the peg and swap it in for another one. So I think that could have been doable, but again, that factors into my theory that I really don't want to give too much attention to, which is that, frankly, like I said, they're just kind of rushing a few of the McFarlanes. Fortunately, there's not too much bad going on here with Earth-2 Batman. There's much more in favor of the figure than not. There was more rooted in favor of replicating that DLC skin and actually paying attention to what works on the suit, and still bringing forth what McFarlane is very strong at doing with their McFarlanes, which is that textured look to the suit, the articulation, and making sure that Batman, first and foremost, looks badass. And on top of that, you're bringing in my favorite clash, black with the red accents, working very well on the figure itself. I would probably say this is definitely going to be my staples of 2023 thus far, and I'm going to be giving him an 8 out of 10. And though there is a part of me that would just absolutely kill, or at the very least pay a little bit of extra money, even scalper prices, for a Futura Arkham Knight Batman, where he's pretty much this guy on the right, though painted black with the red accents, the red eyes. I'm getting giddy just thinking about it. That would be an amazing, maybe even a gold label McFarlane Toy Store exclusive. Oh, I can only think of that. But let's look on the bright side. Bringing us this Earth-2 rendition with the remodeled head gives me hope that finally McFarlane will pull the trigger on an Arkham Origins Batman. What do you guys think? Do you think that McFarlane has it in the cards for bringing us an Arkham Origins Batman? And do you think that this Earth-2 rendition is evidence of that? Let me know your guys' insights in the comment section below. And if you guys want to get your own Earth-2 Batman, use the affiliate links in the description to help out the channel. And you too can also get one of the more finely recommended Batman McFarlanes of the year thus far. And while you guys are waiting for that sucker to ship in, be sure to check out another McFarlane toy review from me that YouTube is recommending to you right now on the screen. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you guys later.